Hello students, my name is Liz Attia and today's topic is the ethical theory of virtue. Okay, so virtue theory. So the virtue theory actually originates from Aristotle, and Aristotle argued that the rightness or wrongness of an action is intrinsically linked to the underlying motive of the person making that action. So what their intention is, what did they intend, what were they thinking, what were they feeling, what was their guiding motivation. So he argued that the disposition to act in the right way is in fact a little bit of what Aristotle argued, in the sense that it's a mixture of intellect, it's a mixture of intuition, and it's a mixture of consequences. It's not innate, but it can be social. It can actually be learned. It's learnt behaviour, as well as being instinctive or based on intuition. Intuition as well as intellect. So virtue here refers to competence in the pursuit of moral excellence and character traits that are morally valuable. But the question, I guess, arises, well, what would you consider virtuous traits? Well, there is a list that's come up by Comte Sponville of 2003 in terms of characteristics or features or traits which human beings would aspire to actually achieve, and that's to be polite, to be trustworthy, to be prudent, to be courageous, justice, generosity, compassion, mercy, gratitude, etc. I guess the issue, though, is that do we all agree with all of those particular traits? Can we actually accept it as a standard that these are the virtuous traits that we all aspire to be like and to have? For example, purity. What does that actually mean? In 2016 or 2017 in contemporary Australian society, what does that actually mean to be pure? And, can we come up with a list that is all extensive and that covers all of the characteristics or traits that we aspire to? So are there any missing? I guess the value of virtue theory is it emphasises the personal and emotional nature of ethical decisions. So this idea that it's based on rules, this idea that it's based on an objective assessment of consequences, well, really, that's inadequate, because it can't be quantitative and it can't be purely on ethical reasoning in healthcare settings, because we're human beings dealing with real life situations where feelings, where emotions, where intentions, and where character actually needs to be taken into consideration. Well, the critique, as most of these ethical theories do have, the weakness of it tends to be strength of others. And what's that? Well, the right and the good is that which the virtuous person would do. Okay, so one of the critiques of virtue theory is that it actually uses a circular argument. What do we mean by that? Well, the right and the good is that which the virtuous person would do, and the virtuous person is one who would do right and good. So it doesn't really actually add any value to how we actually solve ethical dilemmas. The idea being that virtuous people, by the traits that they aspire to actually exhibit, are more likely to make virtuous decisions. But clearly, what does that tell us about how to make the ethical decision? It's a circular argument. So virtuous people will make good decisions, and therefore the decision is virtuous because they're good. So it doesn't have an objective standard there in terms of assessing how ethical and why the decision is actually ethical, irrespective of the person themselves. So an example of this is Nazi doctors might be seen as virtuous because of their patriotism. By focusing on professional virtues or characteristics, virtue ethics runs the risk of basing ethics on the beliefs and judgments of health professionals and giving moral sanction to unacceptable paternalism. The idea that the expert, the health professional being the expert, can't make a wrong decision because it's not in their character to, by virtue of their role, by virtue of their significance and their involvement in that particular situation. Thank you, students. That brings today's topic to an end.